Hey everybody, it's your pal JR again, and welcome to Assume I'm an Idiot, the show where we take complicated stuff and crack it on the knuckles with a ruler until it finally sits up straight and explains itself. I am the idiot.
Freaking idiot.
And on this podcast, we'll be exploring everything from silly fun facts that everyone should know to bigger, more adult stuff like nature, science, infrastructure, business, and so much more. Broken down without corporate talk or industry speak, so even a dull-eyed lummox like me can understand. So sit back and let your thoughts stretch their legs as we poke at how the world works, minus all the meaningless acronyms and verbal confetti. Today's topic is something I've been using nearly my entire adult life and have no idea how it really works. And newsflash, you probably don't either. But first, it's time for Random Stuff You Should Know.
Random stuff you should know.
From the world of nature. Jumping spiders are widely considered the most intelligent spiders and regarded among the most intelligent invertebrates. Yep, those little guys exhibit advanced cognitive abilities, including planning complex hunting routes, using indirect paths and flanking maneuvers that sometimes take up to an hour to plan, solving 3D mazes, and learning from experience. Their high visual acuity enables complex, non-instinctual decision-making rather than simple reaction. Sometimes called eight-legged cats, they have real individual personalities, they know and remember their surroundings, recognize familiar people, engage in recreational play, and even mimic other animals' behaviors. On top of all that, they are absolutely adorable, like little Muppets. So if you see one, don't squish it, you heartless bastards. Also from the world of nature, there's a species of ant that explodes when threatened. Malaysian exploding ants, Calabosus explodens, sounds like a Roadrunner cartoon where they make up the fake Latin names for the species, are specialized brownish-red ants found in Borneo and Malaysia that protect their colony by sacrificing themselves in a process called autophagy. When threatened, workers contract their muscles so intensely that their abdomen ruptures, releasing a sticky yellow toxic goo that smells like curry and immobilizes their attackers. They live high in treetops and are no real threat to humans, but they are omnivores that will eat basically anything. So if you're climbing trees in Borneo, try not to tick them off. Okay, on to the main topic. Today's topic is something most of us use every single day, totally rely on, sometimes get angry at, and unless you're in the telecommunications business, definitely don't understand how it even works. We're talking about cellular service, where it came from, why it sometimes absolutely does not work, why you can't use it on a plane, why my driveway is a technological dead zone for some reason, and why your carrier charges you like you're downloading the Library of Congress every single month. A million years ago, I got my very first real job out of college. I had a job immediately after college, but it was a really dumb job that was so low budge that we worked out of the owner's living room. When I got my real job, I really felt like I made it. At the same time, my bride-to-be also got her first real big-time job. She was only a year behind me graduating in college. So because we both had these big, fancy jobs, and we were really super important now, one day we decided that we needed some kind of car phone so that we could be reachable by our very important jobs at all times. It was mostly because we saw that in movies. Car phones weren't a new thing, but they were crazy expensive and reserved at the time for actors, CEOs, and millionaires. We ponied up our money and proudly marched into the Motorola store to stake our claim in the upwardly mobile sector. The very first phone we got was a bag phone. Some of you don't even know what a bag phone is. But instead of having a phone installed in your car, this was a true mobile phone. You could walk around town and call people from wherever you were. So fancy. It cost a redonkulous amount of money. You had to hang it over your shoulder like an odd-sized blocky purse. It weighed about 10 pounds because of the battery, and it had the phone receiver that was attached to the bag with one of those coiled cords, like an old wall phone. You could only call from certain areas, even though the reason we got it was so that we could be reachable whenever. But cellular service was spotty at best. That didn't matter, though, because when we were walking around with that phone, we thought we were the absolute bee's knees. The cat's pajamas.
You're shagadelic, baby. You're switched on. You're smashing.
And even today, I wish we would have kept it. because it would probably be worth $1 zillion now. After we got misaligned spines from lugging that thing around, when we bought our very first car, we made sure we paid the extra $3,000 to have a car phone installed. $3,000. And it had all the same problems. Spotty signal in most places because of a very limited cell network. It also had to be plugged into the car's cigarette lighter. Another thing a lot of you don't know about. But after all, we were seriously important yuppies with big-time jobs, so none of that mattered. Fast forward a few years, and I got a new job at a very, very large company where I was going to be doing a lot of traveling, both across the U.S. and sometimes out of the country. The company gave me what was called a world phone, which was essentially a satellite phone, as opposed to a cellular phone. It was relatively small and compact, not by today's standards, of course, and you could get signal no matter where on Earth you were. I swear if you were 100 feet underwater, you could still make a call with it. There was no such thing as a dead zone. And battery life? This is 100% true. They never asked for the phone back, so I kept it and stuck it in a drawer. 12 years later, I found it, flipped it open, hit the power switch, and the damn thing turned on. That is some extended battery life right there. Now, I don't have proof of this, but I used to keep my phone in my front pocket, and over time I developed a lump on my leg where the phone was. And only in hindsight did I start to suspect that the phone in my pocket was the cause. Again, no proof, but it was a pretty big coincidence. Anywho, at that company, all the executives got BlackBerries. Once again, a lot of you are too young to even know what a BlackBerry is. But it was the predecessor to the modern-day smartphone, and it was the state-of-the-art, hot shit status symbol of the day. It didn't have all the functionality of modern smart devices, but it did allow you to text message to one another. So the executives got BlackBerries, but all the worker bee slobs got regular cell phones or world phones, if you qualified for such magnificent technology. And we were jealous. We hated it. We wanted fancy BlackBerries. We wanted to be able to type messages to one another without the horrible inconvenience of having to lift a 4-ounce device up to our mouths to speak. What are we, pilgrims? Then came 2007, where one of the people I worked with came in with this brand new thing called iPhone. Now, of course, we had all seen the ads for iPhone, but had never really seen one or considered purchasing one. Once we saw this guy's phone, it was all over from there. We begged and pleaded for the company to upgrade our dopey flip phones with newfangled high-tech iPhones. Their response was to get us all BlackBerries. Well, BlackBerries wasn't what we wanted. That was yesterday's news, clunky, outdated technology. We wanted iPhones, and we wanted them right now. After some severe backlash from the BlackBerry incident, how dare they finally acquiesced and got us all iPhones. And from that point forward, I've never been without one. P.S. My wife's company made her buy her own. Throughout all of this, nobody really cared about how this all worked, how we were talking to each other without cords or phone lines. We just knew it worked, kinda. Not all the time, but some of the time. And even to this day, I'm not exactly sure how it all came about or why certain shortcomings still exist, given the world's absolute reliance on this technology. So I decided to check it out. Fasten your safety belts and put your phones on Do Not Disturb. Here we go. Before I get going, it's funny, I just remembered my best friend used to say that his phone behaved like it was built in 1973, which, funny enough, is not all that far off. Okay, how this all started. And yeah, it was kind of military adjacent. Cellular technology didn't just pop into existence because someone wanted to look cool driving in their Mercedes convertible. It came out of a mix of radio communication, military communication systems, a mobile walkie-talkie, and CB radio used by police and emergency services. Military quote-unquote wireless field phones, meaning portable radio telephones, rather than wired phones, walkie-talkies essentially, came into use in the late 1930s to early 1940s, with major adoption during World War II. While wired field phones were common by World War I, true wireless voice communication for frontline troops became reliable with units like the handy-talkie in 1941 and the walkie-talkie in 1942. And there was early wireless in World War I. It wasn't very widespread, but early wireless telegraphy was used in World War I. The transition, the shift from wired to true reliable wireless battlefield communication for individual troops, solidified between 1940 and 1945. The main complaint of wireless over wired was that it wasn't secure. Wired was way more secure. But now we got out of the military and transitioned to civilian life. Back in the 1940s and 50s, police cars had radios that could call dispatch. But the system wasn't great. In fact, it sucked. There were only a few channels, so only a few people could talk at once. Radio frequencies, RF, work by creating electromagnetic waves that travel through the air at the speed of light to transmit information. They're made by oscillating electric currents on an antenna that are captured by a receiving antenna tuned to the same frequency, which is assigned a number. Like your car radio stations have a number. Two people can't use the same frequency in the same area because of something called co-channel interference, which is a fancy way of saying their signals will overlap and interfere, making a bunch of garbled noise or causing a total loss of communication. The problem is, of course, that the world is a pretty big place, and there are only a finite amount of radio frequencies. So what if someone in the next town is using a certain frequency? Would that mean I can't? Imagine a group chat where only 3 people can speak and everyone else just waits awkwardly. That was early mobile communication. So what do we do about that? An important idea developed from radio frequency technology that actually helped to evolve cellular systems. Specifically, RF signals work with line of sight, meaning if frequencies are generated far enough apart, they won't interfere, and the listener's radio antenna will naturally pick up the strongest signal or tower, which is, quote-unquote, in sight. So whatever tower it sees is the one it's going to lock into. That's a phenomenon known as the capture effect. That's why 2 different cities, even if they're close by, can have 97.5 rock. They're far enough apart where both cities can use the same frequency, and your car radio just jumps to whomever's signal is strongest. We'll talk about how that helped spawn modern cellular service in a second. Anyway, skipping ahead, the first commercial car phone service was introduced by the Bell System in 1946 in St. Louis. It was a bulky 80-pound radio-based system that filled the entire car's trunk and allowed users to make calls through a mobile operator, essentially operating as a shared party line service. Yet another thing you young whippersnappers have never heard of. But basically, it was a glorified walkie-talkie. Enter the mobile phone. 1973. Martin Cooper, a Motorola engineer and executive, made the first handheld mobile phone call on April 3, 1973. Standing on a Manhattan sidewalk, he used a prototype Motorola Dynatac device to call his competitor at Bell Labs, the people that invented the car phone, to rub their noses in the fact that he figured out how to do it before they could. The first humble brag cell call. The phone looked like a brick, weighed like a brick, and likely could be used as a weapon like a brick. And battery life? About 30 minutes maximum. None of that great by today's standards, but at the time, absolutely groundbreaking. An important note, though, for you trivia buffs, Marty's test call was done on a private prototype network that was based in a nearby building. So, a little bit of a secret cheat, some sleight of hand, but he proved it could work. The first commercial cellular service did not launch until a decade later, 1983. So how does all this radio talk and so forth relate to cellular systems? Well, based on that RF principle, the line of sight and capture effect I talked about, engineers had a genius idea. What if we break the world into smaller zones called cells? Let those cells talk to each other and reuse the same frequencies over and over. Kaboom! That's the birth of cellular networks. Instead of one giant system, you get lots of little cells, each with its own tower, all working together. This idea originally started in research as early as the 1940s, but it doesn't really become reality until the 70s and 80s. So yeah, the tech existed, at least in theory, way earlier. It just took decades to make it actually work on a large scale. All that history brings us to the meat of this episode: how your phone works today, or how cellular works. Your phone or other mobile device is basically doing one thing over and over. It's asking, hey, which tower is closest and strongest? It connects to that tower or cell. That cell talks to other cells. The network of cells connects you to everything else. It's not magic or witchcraft. It's a ridiculous amount of invisible coordination happening at incredible, incomprehensible speed. But at its heart, cellular technology is just a new variation of something that was invented in the 1800s by either Nikola Tesla, Marconi, or Heinrich Hertz, depending on who you ask. And that's radio. Yup, Cell phones are just highly sophisticated radios that connect to a bunch of high-end radio towers that are all connected to the internet, etc. That's it. A lot less magic than I thought, but still a little bit magic, come on. But you may be asking, hey idiot, if we already had satellite communication service that was essentially everywhere all the time, why didn't we just stick with that instead of switching to a system that sometimes doesn't give me service in my own driveway? First of all, that's a long question. Please keep your questions brief. Second, that's an excellent question. Satellite communication absolutely existed and was in use before modern cellular became widespread, but it wasn't at all practical for everyday people. Let's rewind for a quick second. Satellites have been used for communication since like the 1960s, especially by the military, by governments, ships, remote expeditions. And yeah, satellite phones were a thing. The thing that may or may not have caused a tumor in my leg. They were big and clunky and had the look of, maybe I'll be calling you from Manhattan, or maybe I'll be calling you from the jungles of Madagascar. I'm ready for both. But the problem with most satellite phones wasn't the size. There were a bunch of issues. The first being latency, the awkward pause. Early satellites sat really far away from Earth, somewhere in the neighborhood of 22,000 miles up. That's called geostationary orbit. So your call had to go from your phone up to space, back to Earth to the person you were talking to, back up to space, and back again to your phone. That created a delay. Not massive, but enough to make you feel like, hey, how are you? I'm good. Sorry, go ahead. I said I'm good. Are you still there? You get the idea. The second issue was cost, and I mean a lot. Satellite systems are insanely expensive. Launching satellites, maintaining them, specialized hardware. So calls were way more expensive than cellular, and I don't mean annoying phone bill expensive. I mean, do I really need to make this call or should I buy a car instead? Expensive. The third issue was signal strength. Old satellite phones needed clear line of sight to the sky. So, you're inside a building? Good luck. In a city? Spotty. In your pocket? No chance it rings. And the fourth issue, the biggest one, was capacity. This is the real reason satellite never really took off for people. Satellite networks couldn't handle millions or now billions of people using them constantly. Cellular networks solved this by reusing radio frequencies across tons of small cells, which massively increases capacity. Think of it like satellite equals one big 4-lane highway. Cellular equals thousands of smaller streets going the same way. More streets equals the ability to better handle more traffic. It reroutes, it detours, but it'll get there faster than bumper-to-bumper highway traffic. So, why did the world go with towers? Because cellular networks were cheaper, faster, scalable. You could add a tower pretty instantly without having to launch a $200 million satellite, and better for dense population, especially in cities, which is where most people live. What happened to satellite phones then? They never went away. They just stayed in their lane. They're still used for military, emergency services, very remote travel, maritime communications. There ain't many cell towers at sea. Aviation, basically anywhere towers don't exist, satellite phones keep on chugging away. And now, in a technical sense, we're circling back to them. They're making a comeback of sorts, which we'll get to in a minute. For anybody who cares, I'm going to give you the quick evolution timeline of the different cellular services, okay? Let's do this at idiot speed. 1G came in the 1980s. It was analog, calls only, sounded like you were talking through a dirty sock. 1990s saw 2G, all digital, texting finally becomes a thing. New phone, who dis, is born. The 2000s saw 3G. That was internet on phones. Slow and painful, but revolutionary. 4G came around the 2010s. That was faster internet, streaming, apps, Uber, everything. And now we have 5G. Faster speeds, lower delay, still confusing and sometimes overhyped. And another little sidestep really quickly before we move on. Cellular versus Wi-Fi versus Bluetooth, because people mix these up all the time. Let's remedy that fast and easy. Cellular is the big one. Long-range signal, it uses towers, connects you to the internet anywhere, in theory. Think, I can text someone 1,000 miles away while sitting in traffic, okay? Wi-Fi is like cellular's smaller local cousin. Shorter range signal, it's usually faster and cheaper. It comes from a local router, so it connects you only to the internet that you're sitting next to, for a lack of a better way of putting it. It's basically internet, but only inside your house, office, or coffee shop, whichever is closest to the router. So basically what I'm saying is you can't use Wi-Fi sitting in the park. You can, but let's not get technical about personal Wi-Fi and hotspots and whatever else. That's nonsense. Bluetooth is the introvert of the group. Very short range, connects to devices directly, headphones, car audio, smartwatches, whatever. Extremely low power. Bluetooth is like, I just want to talk to this one thing that's right next to me. Leave me alone. Okay? Clearer? More confusing? Let's move on. So, let's address something I mentioned at the top, and that's why your service sucks in your driveway, but it's good a few feet away, or what I call cellular betrayal. You step outside your house, no signal. You walk 25 feet, full bars. What kind of technological hijinks is this? Cell signals, it turns out, are incredibly sensitive. They don't like walls, trees, hills, metal, rocks, or flocks of birds. Basically, they only like clear skies with nothing in the way and maybe a soft breeze if you're lucky. So your house might be sitting in a tiny little pocket where signals just can't reach very well. Move slightly, bang, you're back in business. In my house, I literally get better service on the ground floor than I do upstairs. It's maddening. And we've tried about 100 ways to fix the problem with no success. Also, though I like to think the world revolves around me, towers aren't placed for my convenience or for yours. They're placed strictly based on population, cost, and regulations. So, your house, like mine, might just be in a weird in-between spot that someone at the provider decided wasn't worth the time and effort. He can drive down the street to make a call if there's an emergency. Another reason your cell service sometimes blows chunks is due to piggybacking. Many cell providers piggyback on the same towers through a process called co-location. That's where multiple carriers install their own antenna on a single shared tower structure owned by a different company. There's one called Crown Castle, there's one called American Tower. Also, smaller carriers like Consumer Cellular or Spectrum Mobile are known as Mobile Virtual Network Operators, MVNOs. They lease access to the nationwide network of major carriers like AT&T, T-Mobile, Verizon, which means if you have one of those smaller carriers as your provider and cellular traffic starts to get heavy or congested, you're bumped down to the second tier. The main carrier who owns the network, like the big three I mentioned, their customers get priority. So when you see a commercial that claims best cellular network or better service than Spectrum, whatever, that's true, because their customers get first dibs on the signal. It's crappy, but that's why those smaller carriers are so much cheaper, because they don't pay for their own towers. So, now we get to a part that is usually a punchline in a hacky stand-up routine, and that's, why can't I use my phone on a plane? I mean, there's nothing in the way of the cell towers, and I don't for a second believe my cell phone interferes with the highly advanced airplane communication, so what gives? Why can't I at least text at 30,000 feet? Don't you know I have to be in constant communication with the rest of the world or my whole life and the lives of those I love will collapse? Do you know who I am? Quick aside, especially for young kids listening, millennials through Gen Z, learn to just be alone with your thoughts. It's an important skill to learn. Sometimes you can just sit and think without stimulation, okay? If you're in the waiting room at the doctor's office, I promise you won't die if you just sit there, close your eyes, and rest your brain for 10 minutes. Check out my episode about social media to help explain why you need the heroin fix that is nonstop content. And anyone who's doing this without the courtesy of earbuds, I think it should be a law that you ask everyone else in the room if they want to hear the audio of people falling down or dogs doing funny things. Punishable by jail time. Also, if you're making a loud phone call in a quiet waiting room and talking about anything other than a life or death emergency, I secretly and unapologetically hope the ceiling over your head collapses and knocks you unconscious. Just stop it. It's impolite at the minimum, and it makes you look like a self-important ass. Sorry, I feel better. What were we talking about? Oh yeah, cell phones on airplanes and why you can't use them. Well, technically you kind of can use them now, but not in the way you think. The main reason you gotta use airplane mode is to prevent cellular radio signals from causing electromagnetic interference with sensitive cockpit navigation and communication systems, especially during takeoff and landing. It's rare, but this interference can create distracting noises in a pilot's headset or disrupt navigation instruments, particularly in older aircraft. Here are the specific layered reasons for the phones on airplane mode rule. Layer 1, potential interference with avionics. I just talked about that. Remember, phones do emit radio signals, especially in the 800 to 900 megahertz range. That's exactly the range that airplanes use. They're super sophisticated walkie-talkies. They absolutely can interact with unshielded cockpit wiring, leading to noise in the pilot's headsets, which is like when you put your phone near a speaker and it starts going. Layer 2 is safety over convenience. In critical phases of flight, low visibility, landing, takeoff, whatever, any distraction or interference for pilots is a safety risk. So that kind of leads to a better safe than sorry protocol. Layer 3 is aggravated signal searching. At high altitudes, a phone not in airplane mode will constantly search for towers, causing it to transmit at maximum power. That increases potential interference. Layer 4 is network congestion. Cell phones on a plane can connect to numerous towers simultaneously, which can cause interference with ground-based cellular networks. And Layer 5 is, it's mostly precautionary. Modern aircraft, that's any plane built after the mid-1980s, are much better shielded than older ones, and a single phone is unlikely to cause a disaster. However, the cumulative effect of hundreds of devices all vying for signal has got to be regulated. When you're in a plane, you're moving fast, you're high up, your phone suddenly sees a ton of towers. Instead of cleanly connecting to one, it says, oh God, there's too many options. Now multiply that by 200 people on a plane, you create chaos for the network. Also, cell towers are aimed down at the ground, not up at the sky. Your signal would suck anyway. That's why planes use satellite internet instead, which is also aimed at the ground, but above the aircraft. And it doesn't use radio frequencies, or I should say, the same type of RF. But as I also mentioned, satellites are far more expensive to use. So when I said you sorta can use your phone, it usually comes with a fee to cover the cost to the airline for allowing access to the satellite, as well as additional hidden fees in the price of your ticket, which is a topic for another time. So it's not totally some kind of grift or scam to make you pay American Airlines internet service. That's part of it. But there are genuine technical reasons why you can't just leave your phone in normal mode and use it on a plane. Also because of what I just ranted about, that there would be 200 loud conversations about what to get grandma for her 90th birthday going on at the same time on every flight. Everyone just sit back and think quiet thoughts. Please. On the subject of scams and grifts, I've had conversations with friends before about data versus voice service. Why does data usage cost more? Is there a technical reason, or is it just a big money-making scam? Well, the answer is it's kind of both. Calls are super efficient now. They use very little bandwidth, they're compressed, optimized, and really easy for a network to handle. Data? Data is a monster. Streaming video, apps, downloads, that eats up network capacity like crazy. Only so much water can flow through a pipe at one time. And because theoretically calls should take priority, from a technical standpoint, data is using up the pipe space at an inequitable rate. It's hogging the pipe. That sounds dirty, but it isn't. So data is more expensive to deliver. But carriers also know you need and want your precious data. It's supply and demand. You want data service? We've got data service. How bad do you want it? Well, here's what you have to pay for it, you media junkie. So yeah, there's real costs, and yes, there's also what I'll politely call profit strategy. Okay, we've talked about where it came from, how it developed, and the pros and cons of cellular, but let's talk about where it goes from here. What's the future look like? And this is why I mentioned that satellite technologies are making a comeback. Yes, satellite phones came first, but they were too expensive, too slow, and too limited for everyday life. So we built towers instead. Now, decades later, we're circling back and combining both together. Enter Starlink, the technology that changes everything. For decades, cellular service has depended on towers on the ground, which means remote areas equals bad service, mountains equals bad service, oceans equals no service. Now along comes Starlink. Starlink uses low Earth orbit satellites. So instead of 22,000 feet up in geostationary orbit, Geostationary orbit means that they sit in one spot and rotate exactly along with the Earth. Okay? So instead of geostationary orbit, the Starlink satellites are only 350 miles up in low Earth orbit, which means they are in constant fast motion. That solves a few of the major problems that satellite-based phones used to have. Lower latency. There's no 22,000-mile trek to and from space between callers. So the time it takes to bounce a signal off the satellite is way lower. Better coverage. It's a massive network of small satellites, a little over 10,000 of them at the moment, all talking to one another and all moving together over receiving antennas on the ground. They are all in the line of sight of that antenna, so there's really no dead spots. It also allows for smaller, cheaper devices to use the service versus dedicated satellite phones that were always chonky and expensive. So now we're heading toward a world where signal drops will become a thing of the past. Your normal phone will be able to use towers where available, but satellites where it can't find a tower. So there's a chance I don't have to hang my head and arm out of my upstairs bathroom window just to call my sister. And it's not just for calls and texts. It's total internet and data connection, essentially anywhere in the world. Think of how huge that would be to developing countries, where building towers is too expensive, very rural areas, disaster relief zones where the power to the cell towers might have been cut off. It's reliable service, or at least as another option, everywhere, globally, all the time. And we're already seeing early versions of this. Some phones can send emergency texts via satellite. That's just the beginning. So is cellular going to go away? Probably not. What happens instead, as I alluded to, is a hybrid system. Towers for the cities, satellites for everywhere else. Your phone will just pick whatever works best. Like the old capture effect I talked about with your car radio. You won't even think about it. It'll just happen. The last thing I want to talk about is something else I mentioned at the top. I told you the story of my lumpy leg that I suspect was caused by keeping my old phone in my pocket. So I decided to really research it to get a definitive answer to the question, is my phone giving me cancer? If you were alive in the 90s or early 2000s, you definitely heard about this. Cell phones cause brain cancer. Don't hold it up to your head. Use speakerphone or you're doomed. So was that real? Or was that just pre-internet panic stirred up in no small part by the nightly news? First, what kind of signal are we talking about here? As I've already discussed, cell phones and other mobile devices use radio frequency energy, RF, which is a type of electromagnetic radiation. Now, before you panic, there are two types of radiation. Ionizing radiation, that's the dangerous kind, like X-rays and gamma rays. That stuff can damage DNA and absolutely cause cancer. Non-ionizing radiation is the phone kind. Radio waves, Wi-Fi, Bluetooth, cellular signals. This stuff does not have enough energy to damage your DNA. That's a huge difference. It would be the same as if someone said, don't listen to the radio in your car or in your house, it'll cause cancer. You would think they were a kook. Well, cell phones and radios both use the same kind of RF signals, just in a different way. What do the actual health authorities say? Let's go straight to the grown-ups in the room. The World Health Organization, WHO, reports no adverse health effects have been established as being caused by mobile phone use. However, they also note that research is still ongoing. The National Cancer Institute, the NCI, explains cell phones emit non-ionizing radiation which does not directly damage DNA and is unlikely to cause cancer. Large studies have not found consistent evidence linking cell phone use to brain tumors. And the FDA and the CDC all pretty much agree. There is no strong or consistent evidence that cell phone use causes cancer. Okay, so why did people think it was dangerous? Good question. Here's a few reasons. One, phones are held next to your head. So most people thought signal near brain equals bad, which feels logical, but isn't how this type of radiation works. Secondly, early studies were inconclusive. Some early research showed weak or unclear signals of risk. The media took that and ran with possible link to cancer, which eventually turned into phones cause cancer in public perception. And thirdly, fear of the invisible. You can't see radio waves, and humans don't like invisible things touching their brain. That's a totally fair instinct. But what about long-term use? This is the big question. Okay, but I've been using a phone for 20 plus years. What's the story? Researchers have looked at this. Some very large studies, including international ones, have found no consistent increase in brain tumors and no clear cause and effect relationship. But they still keep studying it because science doesn't like to say never. It likes to say based on current evidence. it leaves them an out. So is there any risk at all? Honestly, no. There is no strong proven link between normal cell phone use and cancer. But scientists always leave that door open that says we'll keep on checking just in case. All right. So what about 5G, the brand new panic? Every generation of wireless tech gets blamed for something. Now it's 5G. First of all, the G is not some secret technology. It stands for generation, for anyone who doesn't know. All 5G means is this is officially the 5th generation of cellular network technology. That's it. If it makes you feel better, call it version 5 instead of 5G. It's less scary. Same story, same physics, same conclusion so far. No solid evidence of harm at exposure levels used in everyday cases, okay? If you're still paranoid, and no judgment here, whatever makes you sleep better, use your speakerphone. Use headphones. Don't sleep with your phone laying on your face. There are some real risks. Ironically, your phone is more likely to cause you harm by distracted driving, bad posture. We're going to have future generations of hunchbacks, degraded eyesight, and doom scrolling your mental health into oblivion. It's more likely to do any of that than give you cancer. So your phone isn't cooking your brain, but it might be nuking your attention span. And that lump in my thigh, maybe I grew a venom sac, I don't know, but I can't blame the phone. Doesn't mean I'm not watching you, phone. So let's wrap this up with some final thoughts. Sometimes your phone feels like magic. I often marvel at the fact that I can watch a movie on a tiny device while sitting in a public park somewhere. I also often think of my grandfather, who was blown away when they introduced the preview channel in the late 80s. That later became the TV Guide channel. And for anyone who has never seen it before, it just scrolled what was playing on other channels all day, every day. He could not believe that you could see what was on TV without a newspaper or printed TV guide. So I can't even imagine how he would react today to all this technology. A device that can make calls, message people with type, send mail back and forth, play videos, play music, play games, and everything else would completely blow the back of his head clean off. That's all due to cellular service, which, as it turns out, is just a newfangled version of a technology that's been around since the 1890s, radio. The actual magic part is a constant, nearly instant negotiation between your device and a giant invisible system. A system that's old in concept and extremely complex. It still has limitations. It'll still stop working the very moment you need it the most. But it's constantly evolving with hybrid satellite cellular systems, not to mention the new 6G that's coming soon. Which, calm down, that just means 6th generation, and like all other generations of cellular, will not cause brain cancer or, in my case, leg tumors. Is it perfect? No. Is it really incredible technology? Absolutely, and it's getting more incredible every year. There are good and bad parts to all of that. Your phone is getting smarter. In my stupid opinion, it's causing us all to get a little dumber. But if you really think about how far we've come in under 40 years, it's all amazing. And if you do think about it, try to do it quietly with your phone turned off.
Get up! Quiet! I hate noise!
That does it for this time. I appreciate you listening. I really hope I helped you wrap your brains around all of this, or at least didn't make it more confusing. Want to rant and rave at me about what I got wrong? Think I'm an even bigger idiot than I say I am? Or maybe you have a cool topic that you want us to explore. Drop us a line at our email, hello@stansgranola.com. Damn it, Stan! We talked about this 100 times. I am not going to promote your dopey granola business.
I gave it a shot.
If you want to be a sponsor, pay me and I'll promote it.
Would it kill you?
Yeah, it will in this case.
Try.
Reach out to us at our email, hello@ruffandtumblemedia.com. That's hello@rufftumblemedia.com. Stop moping, Stanley.
It's got CBD in it.
Join me for another upcoming episode of Assume I'm an Idiot. I'm your pal JR. Catch you again soon.